If you've never bought XRP, if you haven't looked into Omnia Network, and if you don't think the Ethereum to layer 2 fee structure is broken, you need to give this episode a good listen. Today, we're joined with Austin King from Omnia Network, the co-founder, and we have one of the most interesting conversations that I've had throughout all of these interviews, purely because he gives a very interesting view from his experience going from a Harvard student to founding his first company to selling that to Ripple and then founding Omnia Network, and now basically addressing the interoperability of the Ethereum network, but also having some very unique insights into what Ripple is doing and how he sees not only DeFi playing out, but real world assets playing out, and also a lot of insights into how the Trump administration and policies that we see being talked about are going to affect everything across the board. We really do touch on everything, and I walk away with a couple of my core theses, not broken, but definitely things I need to reconsider. But there are areas, especially around the Ethereum fees, that I think about very differently after this conversation. And I also think about I would say, entire industry for how people are approaching what the future really does look like. I have more context into that after this conversation. So I hope it's useful to you. Grateful for having my project 555 sponsor this, as well as Future Proof being a sponsor for this episode. And as always, thank you for listening. I think you really, really enjoy this episode. So sit back and enjoy. Joined today with Austin King, CEO at Omni Labs, a person who has a very long and tenured experience within the Web3 ecosystem, and especially crypto. I think we're going to get into a little bit of everything, a lot of very heavy hitting areas, especially now that we have Trump in the Oval Office right now. I know you've been following the regulatory stuff pretty closely. But also on the kind of like shift from how we're seeing, the fragmentation on the ETH side become like a big talking point, tokenization across the board, real world assets. So there's a lot to get into here, but obviously let's just kind of start with who you are, what your history looks like, how you end up where you are today.
Yeah, we got a lot there. Cool. We'll kick it off with
these intros, man.
Yeah, we'll kick it off with where things started for me. So originally, I got into crypto in 2017. I had an internship at Microsoft, and weirdly, I just didn't have to do anything, and so I just got really deep into crypto. Just started learning how to program on Ethereum. Started mining Ethereum, and yeah, coming back to my senior year, I was just I always wanted to build a company after I graduated from college. And at this point, I was like, I'm building a crypto company. I don't know exactly what it's going to do, but I'm going to build a crypto company. And so I spent most of my senior year figuring out what the highest leverage ways were to contribute to the space. And by the end, I had figured it out. And it's interesting because this company actually, in many ways, was like a predecessor to what Omni has become. But I ended up building an interoperability network. I did this from 2017 to 2019. It scaled up to 10 billion payments. And it was able to do that because it was built on top of L2s at the time, which were like Lightning Network. That didn't mean Optimism, Arbitrum. It meant like Lightning Network, one of those more OG protocols. And so, yeah, it had great performance properties, and Ripple bought it, obviously, because they're super focused on payments. And so they wanted to integrate it into their product suite. Spent a year there. It was really cool. I had opportunities to co-author another protocol with the CTO, David Schwartz. But after a year in vesting, I was like, I want to build another company. I want to get back into it. And so that's where Omni came from. And for anybody who's not familiar with Omni and what it does, effectively, the way that we're looking at the world is that in the on-chain economy today, there's a ton of really useful financial services that people can benefit from. And so, you can buy treasury bills, you can take out loans, you can trade, you can use derivatives. But what we're held back by today is it's really complex to use it. It requires a ton of technical expertise. You got to know seed phrase. You got to think about different chains. You have to have gas on those different chains, maybe even wrapped assets on these different ones. So really what we're focused on is just making it extremely easy to access these different financial services. And we actually do that in a way that's very comparable to how Robinhood and Citadel work together. And so, on Robinhood, you just click button to buy Apple stock. You don't need to think about that. And behind the scenes, they're selling off that request to Citadel, who goes and does it for you. The cool thing with Omni is that this kind of auction process happens in an open and transparent way on chain. So, with Robinhood and Citadel, there's definitely been speculation like, if Citadel's paying this much money, like, are they
Right.
screwing
I
users?
mean,
Like,
there's been
what?
a ton of speculation there.
Yeah. And so the cool thing with this is when you're using open and transparent systems like a blockchain, you can just guarantee to users like, hey, this is an open auction, anybody can participate. And so you have confirmation that like you are getting the best outcome for your intended request. So that's kind of where I came from, and what Omni is high level. Sorry if that was a lot, but
No, that's perfect.
8 years and one little, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, dealing with Ripple and kind of going down that rabbit hole, selling your first company, was that like did that propel you? Obviously, you want to be a builder, and you're kind of built into that being a computer science background person. I think everybody in that world is just they're mentally programmed to build stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, like with Ripple, did that influence like jumping into Omni and like seeing how everything's fragmented and just like the future of how everything works together and making it easier for the future of like finance to happen?
Yeah, it's funny because no, that's not what happened. So, my first company connected Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, these various networks so that you can make payments across them. And then I went to Ripple for a year, and then I got really interested in DeFi. So when we started out this company, what we raised both rounds on initially was a DeFi protocol, actually. And so what happened was we built this DeFi protocol, and it did really well. It hit the protocol cap in like 2 days after launching. So we had like 50 mil TVL in this protocol. And so we're like, okay, we need to scale this thing across these L2s. At this point in time, it was becoming clear that like, okay, the roll-up centric roadmap for Ethereum is now like enshrined. This is the way that we're going. So we wanted to make sure that we could like not only maintain our market share, but grow our market share. So we started thinking about how to expand this across these different L2 platforms. And in the process, we were talking with founders of other DeFi protocols. And basically, anybody who did well on Ethereum L1 was thinking about the same problem. Like, how do I make sure I don't get sidelined in the process
Right.
as Ethereum scales up? And so it hit a point where we're like, wait a minute, should we stop building this in like a custom way for ourselves? And should we just offer this as like a generalized platform for others to use? And so that's kind of how I circled back to like, interoperability is still like a key part
Gotcha.
of this industry. And so it works across Ethereum and 3 different rollups today. But where we're going and like the goal here really is just like the entire on-chain economy, all these different platforms so that people don't need to think about like, is it on Solana or is it on Base? Is it Arbitrum or Ethereum L1? Just like cool opportunity, cool application. I want to use it. I don't need to think about the fact that technically my funds started on Optimism and they ended on Solana. So yeah, it took a roundabout path, but here we are back at interoperability.
It always drives me nuts when I hear people tell me that a single chain is going to be the one that wins it all. I just
Yeah.
don't. You'll never see that happen. I think we're in a multi-chain world. If you don't see that at this point, I mean, that's
Yeah,
how I feel.
for
But
sure. I mean, yeah,
no.
like,
I mean, everybody has like their own advantage, but you should
mhm,
be able to. If I have Solana, I would love to be able to. I should be able to go buy a swap of anything else on Bitcoin without
mhm,
having to deal with like saying to Coinbase and swapping, then sending it over to another wallet. Like it is so fractured right now.
mhm.
But that's just the early growing pains of where we are in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and the more computer science part of my brain is like, it's almost not only that you need to think about the scale, like can we put the entire global economy on one chain? That's a whole question. And to me, like my answer to that would be like, no. Like, and if your answer is yes, you're probably underestimating the scale of like what we can do with these systems. But on top of that, the like more kind of like engineering side is these systems can be optimized for different use cases. There's different and there's trade-offs as you are designing them in different ways. And so even if somehow we could put the entire world on one platform, you still could create optimized environments to run other types of software. And we see that in Web 2 today. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point it's quite clear that the world is very multi chain. And I think that's good. That's how we scaled the internet. We scaled horizontally, and we're going to do the same thing with blockchain technology.
100%. Right now, today, Omni only addresses Ethereum rollups and L2s, correct?
Mhm. Correct.
Um, obviously Ethereum sentiment currently is in a weird spot.
Yeah.
And I think that there's more and more like question about like who's going to kind of like lead the next charge. And it does seem like L2 builders are the ones that are like pushing further and further and further. You guys have positioned yourselves though, where like as we see new features and functionality go out on the L2 side, that is not only interoperable, like the interoperability of that is kind of locked in across the board, but also if Ethereum at the base level changes something that isn't like fracturing the entire like ecosystem, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think where we're at with things is, I mean, the for as a bigger, I mean, maybe not like a massive ETH holder, but as somebody who has probably too much money in ETH, like it's been, it's been grueling to see Bitcoin like have the price action that it has had. But honestly, I think where we're at with ETH, the asset today, is for a long time Ethereum had this very cool narrative of like ultrasound money. And it's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, what's sound money? It's like money that doesn't inflate. It's like what's better than sound money? It's like money that like the supply goes down over time. And so it did this, you know, it was deflationary. It was super cool to see this. But that's not the case anymore. And like really, as more activity is migrated to rollups, um, this has been clearly communicated effectively that this will almost maybe never be the case again. And so I think the whole thesis around why people are buying ETH kind of collapsed. I do think that the Ethereum ecosystem has like the largest mass of like developer talent in the industry, and I love the Ethereum community. But yeah, like ETH the asset has been put through a beating the past like 18 months here.
It certainly has, and you can tell on the timeline who has been a holder and who is not.
Yeah.
It's brutal. But it always makes me think back to like, 2021, 22, the chunk of DeFi, right? Like that was happening nowhere else but except for on Ethereum,
Mhm.
at that volume. And now we've seen in the recent, months, we've seen that shift to L2s, we've seen that shift to Bitcoin, to Solana. Um, and how do you look at, and this kind of gets to, I guess, as we talk about like real world assets becoming tokenized, like what does the future of DeFi look like in
Mhm.
your eyes? Because I think you have a very unique look at when most people think DeFi, they think just like, okay, I'm swapping Ethereum for USDC, or I'm
Yeah.
swapping, Sol for, Jupe, like whatever it might be. But when you start talking about, hey, there's actual like tangible assets being put on the chain that I can swap for, and I could be
Mhm.
swapping between I mean, it gets kind of like convoluted, but there is a much deeper sense to DeFi, um, that I'm sure you have some insight to.
Yeah, I think I have a spicier take here. So
Okay.
my perspective really is that we've been through this. So far, we are still in the bootstrapping phase, and it's still highly experimental. 2020, 2021, it was very much like, hey, here's the idea of DeFi, like, and people started to understand that more. It was very much constrained by the performance of the underlying infrastructure. Now we're at a point where transactions are nearly instant and free for users. So we've kind of like run through this bootstrapping phase where there's all these very interesting financial services out there, but we're only using like altcoins and like meme coins and shit coins in it to like trial them out. And it's helped us mature these systems a lot to the point that it's like, wow, like these things are basically free and instant to use at this point. So we've been improving the underlying technology powering this. Where I think this is going though, and I feel like I don't see people talk about this that much, is that what I believe will happen here is there are very clear incentives for traditional financial assets to move on chain. And the reason that is because there is a whole world of buyers out there. If you look at the trading volume compared to market cap for crypto assets, it's actually really, really high compared to like equities in the US for a
Hmm.
number of these assets. Like, most people don't understand that, but like these are a lot of these are like made up assets, but they're actually very liquid. And that comes downstream of this like global base of people being willing to trade them. So there's very clear incentive for these assets to move on chain. And so what I think, 4 years from now, let's kind of like imagine where we're at the end of the Trump administration. I think it's totally possible that a majority of DeFi activity is happening strictly between tokenized traditional financial assets. And we kind of are going through this phase right now where we're bootstrapping these like the tech and infrastructure that powers DeFi. And on top of that, we're just going to have tokenized versions of like higher quality traditional financial assets. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the world. That's how I'm like positioning our go-to-market strategy at Omni. And I just don't see that many teams. I feel like it's like us, Ripple, Ondo, and like Plume that are like thinking through the world, like, or thinking about the future this way. But to me, it just feels clear that like I see the incentives for the migration that come on chain. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I think we saw that discussion probably a month or so ago about, hey, when is coin going to be like a tradable asset on chain?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw some speculation there with, it's also been kind of crazy. Maybe you have some comments here on how Ripple has been one of the biggest donators recently. Like they're very strongly supporting this new administration under the
Mm-hmm.
guise, I believe, of, hey, regulation and getting some clarity on things and setting a standard. How do you see the next 4 years changing things for you as a founder in this space, especially since you're a US based founder?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you it's like, especially in 2018 times, it was not ideal to be building a crypto company. Just like you hear about Operation Choke Point 2.0 and
Yeah.
stuff of like restricting like crypto companies from having access to the banking industry. But like in 2018, it's just like cool. That's like what's the term here? Like champagne problems.
Right.
Like you definitely could not open a bank account if they knew you had anything to do with crypto. It was just like obvious, like, oh, okay, well, crypto just had this massive like ICO scam era, and so like if you work in crypto, you clearly are a nefarious actor. And so that's my experience. Is kind of I've been gradually like, as I've been moving through my career in America, I have seen progress. Just originally, like before Trump even got elected, like him being like, if I get elected, things will be good. That alone, like, changed things. And now he's actually elected. And for the first time ever, we're likely to get regulatory clarity on the crypto front. I think Ripple really has been saying this for, at this point, over 8 years of like, we don't want to live in a world without regulation because this industry stagnates. That's how you get a world where the only thing happening in DeFi is altcoins being used against one another. Instead, like we got regulatory clarity, we could migrate assets on chain. So Ripple has been saying this for quite a long time. And in my first company, like, it's fun. It's funny. As somebody who has spent a ton of time in the Ethereum ecosystem, I feel like they usually hate Ripple, but like I started out. Mhm.
I mean, I as an early entrant into this space back, I mean, way back in the day. I mean, even geez, like even like the second cycle. I remember like 2017 when like I got back on Twitter again. If
Mhm.
you mentioned Ripple, it was like, it was like, what? Oh, you're an idiot. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you have a take there. For me, it just has been seen as like the boomer token. It's been
Mhm.
that's how I think most people look at it. But it's clear like they're real players in the space that it's just a narrative issue from X.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it comes from how Ripple positioned themselves early on as like the adults in the room. We're going to work with the existing traditional financial system. And in the beginning, it was really Bitcoin and XRP. XRP is older than Ethereum. I don't know if like everybody knows that, but like what Ripple had to do originally was uh, position themselves in contrast to Bitcoin. And so with Bitcoin, you had these like intense libertarians who like are here to displace the existing financial system. And Ripple came in and were like, no, let's just make it better. Let's make it easier for people to access it. Let's improve it. And that did not mesh well
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the
I think
Bitcoin
I think
crowd
one
at
of
the
the
time.
early like pitches I saw was like, well, we'll replace Swift like for bank
Hmm.
wires and stuff like that. And like, I think it makes total sense. But most people are like, well, why are we like replace like why don't we like make a whole new system? And like this seems
Hmm.
like we're just giving the boomers on Wall Street basically like our bags.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
which again, looking back on that argument is insane.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, my perspective on it as like somebody who originally got involved because of ETH, but like then started working across Ethereum, XRP, and Bitcoin, and then spent a number of years on Ethereum. Now we're doing more with XRP. Like I've worked across a lot of these different communities, and they all have their virtues. Honestly, like I said, Ethereum has an incredible developer community, and they're well intentioned. They really are. Bitcoin has this cult unlike any in the world has ever seen, and they're also well intentioned, but like they're like the Bitcoiners, if you piss them off, like like
Right.
it's a whole different thing. And then there's the XRP army, which they tend to like not be as like I think a lot of people think of crypto Twitter. I think it's very like Ethereum centric and like if you like Solana centric at this point. But the XRP army is on Twitter. It's just like not the side of Twitter that like a lot of these Ethereum people are on. And they have like an insanely strong community. And it's the type of people who are like, yeah, like greater freedom sounds really nice, but like I also can't even like pay my cousin in Europe. Like, so I don't know if this coin is working with banks across the world and they're going to make that better, then like that sounds rational to me. And I'm going to buy that coin and not bet on like gold being displaced. So they all kind of bring their different things to the table. And I don't know, I feel fortunate in having like worked across all of them throughout my career so far. Because I feel like some people really dig their heels in and do not like these other communities.
Yeah. Well, and what's your take on we see this maxi mindset that
Mhm.
people have on the timeline where they just choose, hey, this token or this ecosystem, this is it. And I'm gonna shut everything else off. Do you think
Mhm.
that's super detrimental?
I think it is not constructive to the growth of the space at large, and I think it's also rather constraining in regards to innovation. Just like you got to give credit where it's due. Each of these different platforms are like innovating and driving progress in their own respective ways. So uh, I think the future that we're heading towards is one where people don't even know what chain the activity that they're doing stuff is on. It'll take time to get there. But there's no way that we scale like a billion plus people in the on-chain financial system. Like, do you think about, I don't even, okay, we're on this website right now doing the streaming. Is this happening on Google Cloud, AWS? Like, we have no idea. Like, we don't care. Like,
It
I
just
think,
happens.
yeah, I think I hold both like Amazon and Google stock, but like, I'm not like a maximalist about like Google Cloud, because it's just like, okay, cool. We can just go to this website, get what we want to do done, and like have this utility. That's the world that we're going towards. I think this like maximalist mindset almost traps people deeper in the weeds of like thinking about the chains. And I don't think people in the future will think about the chains at all. They'll just be like these incredibly powerful shared databases that power the like money side of the internet.
Again, I keep coming back to on most of these conversations, I come into conversations with like I have a general understanding of where things are going to go and I have my opinions, but I am always shifted like deeply into like XRP clearly has its spot. Clearly has its spot. And it seems like that a lot of the attention is just on like the hype in the space. And there are areas that get quickly overlooked that are building out like real pipes. I call it like the pipes in the sewers of the ecosystem.
Mhm.
That just need like they really need to like people to like grab them and like understand like, hey, this is the true future. It's not
Mhm.
going to be the new meme coin that just launched and is gone in the next 2 months. You need to be looking at like what is the foundation of the entire ecosystem of crypto
Yeah.
Web3 that we're going to see. Um, I'm curious, I mean, we've kinda touched on real world assets a bit, but I feel like that's a deeper topic to go into. You touched on equities. Within the real world assets, vertical, what are, I guess, the most interesting areas that you see outside of that?
Yep. Yeah. This is a great question. So yesterday, I had a meeting with Ripple's RWA lead, and I honestly think he had like a pretty nuanced and insightful take on this. And so, I come from the crypto world. Like if anything, I've learned about finance because of crypto, not the other way around. I feel like there are a lot of us in this industry that, yeah, we've become more financially literate because we love these systems and we love our coins and we like playing around with them. And so, uh, yeah, this conversation was very interesting to me because one of the main things that he communicated in it and like how they're thinking about it is RWAs are not like a singular thing. there's an unbelievably large spectrum in regards to the complexity of these products as well as the regulatory complexity that will accompany them. So the mental model here is like we have one end of the spectrum. You could say like the absolute edge of RWAs. You could argue as stable coins. It's like these are like fiat currencies that are like from the real world. Sure, it's not like a stock or something, but like this is kind of the most like simple RWA that we have,
It's
and
a
it's
tokenized
also
dollar.
yeah, it's straight. Yeah, it's tokenized,
Yeah.
and it's yeah, and so that's like the most simple. It also just like does not have as much regulation around it as like bonds or equities, you know. And so the interesting thing here is this obviously is one of the like biggest use cases that we've seen grow in adoption throughout the world. Tether has an incredibly deep like liquidity throughout the crypto financial system, and many people throughout the world are using stablecoins to pay each other at this point. So that's kind of like the most simple end of the RWA spectrum. Now let's hop all the way over to the other end, which, you know, I think there's a pretty fair argument to be made that will like, it'll take the longest. This is probably like exotic derivatives that have like very complex payout structures, and maybe it's like even structured products that compose multiple of these together, and there's just like a lot of technical complexity in regards to what is that asset as well as like regulatory complexity around it. Like, okay, can like right now, like I don't know the exact regulation around like certain types of these more complex derivative products, but like it's probably more complex than treasury bills. And so I think treasury bills are kind of like one step deeper in from stablecoins. And we're seeing this on chain today. Right now, there's a number of companies that are issuing a treasury bill product. And so this, similar to stablecoins, I think is like incredibly valuable to have on chain. It like you live in you said you live in the US, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, like to us, treasury bills, it's like, cool, okay, whatever, like 5% yield. But like to people who don't even have a stable fiat currency, having the ability to access not only stable exposure to the US dollar, but yield on the US dollar is literally life changing. Like there are many, many people throughout the world today who have to support their parents just because they live under a government regime that is terrible at managing its
Right.
finances.
Right.
And
I think
so
back to Venezuela.
yeah, yeah, like Venezuela, Argentina is clearly going through it right
Clearly.
now. Like there's many of these different countries where it's just like they can't manage their finances and their citizens suffer downstream of that. And so with treasury bills, it's more nuanced than stable coins. You know, there's a bit more regulation around this and stuff. Not as much regulation, I would say, as like, you know, Apple stock or like Coinbase stock, but it's like one step deeper into RWAs. Um, Kind of going a little further, there's like, can corporations issue like debt? Like, is that the next bucket of RWAs? That's one thing that I'm like, uh, I'm diving deeper in. Honestly, I don't have a crazy smart thing to say about this right now because I need like to do deeper research here. But it's possible that this is the next step that we take into the RWA side, and it leans deeply into the capital formation superpowers of crypto. Like, if some corporation wants to raise debt, could that be an ICO? Could they like instead of a token, could it be like debt that they are issuing and they just pay back down the line? It kind of makes you think about like interesting structures like that because that's just a clear superpower of crypto. Like everybody across the world can like buy something. So like
Right.
could they raise capital better? But all this to kind of say, like, I think it'll be a gradual evolution as we unlock different components of the like RWA spectrum here, downstream of like how complex is it from a like actual financial product perspective as well as a regulation perspective.
It's interesting because you could think about it from two ends. One, it could possibly incredibly strengthen US uh different US products that we have because of the strength that we have.
Mhm.
Which makes being, I think, a first mover in the space extremely important for the US government.
Mhm.
Um while also kind of breaking down the walls that are like, hey, you have to be in the US to get access to a lot of these products.
Mhm.
All of a sudden we're opening up the walls and saying like, hey, if you have a dollar and have it on the blockchain, you can buy this product. Then I guess that opens up like a bunch of KYC and a bunch of other issues that I'm sure we'll run
For sure.
into. But um, I think we've already seen this, especially with like the TikTok comment that we saw Trump make, which was, we'll let somebody buy it if you give the government 50%.
Mhm.
I'm sure the US government is gonna, be under the guise of, look, we'll take anybody's money into the US, but we're gonna have our fair share of it in some way. It'll be
Mhm.
very interesting to see that play out. Um, we haven't seen
Yeah.
any real announcements on crypto regulation though yet from them. Only SEC head for their little the special task force. And then I think we've seen some pardons, et cetera, but we haven't seen any moves. I know a lot
Mhm.
of people are waiting on the Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah.
We'll see.
If you want to dive into that, uh, yeah, I mean, if the US establishes a strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think I think I usually I'm very conservative with the things that I communicate, especially if people can like make some price projection on it or something. But if they do that, what that's the message that sends to the rest of the world is that the issuer of the global reserve currency is selling that currency for this other asset. And so if you are the leader of any other nation across the world, immediately you're like, it is irrational for us to not start stockpiling this as well. So that to me, there's a lot that's kind of like up in the air and like we'll see what happens here. But if a strategic Bitcoin reserve is established, actually a very good way to communicate this is uh, the prior cycle. I feel like there was a meme of like the institutions are buying our bags. Like, just like, yeah, but what if it's nation states? Like, what if it's nation states buying
Right.
our bags? Like that will have just like
Different size. I don't
unbelievable,
think people understand the difference in size. Like, I mean, we've
yeah.
seen we've seen the inflows, and it's been tens of billions of dollars. Um, we'll see some really crazy ones on like BlackRock and Fidelity we're buying. Um, but when you have nation states that are dumping in possibly trillions of dollars, what happens? Um,
Yeah, I think that to me is like geopolitically that would like alter the like global power structure where it's like, wow, like countries are hedging with Bitcoin. Like like it's crazy because I would have like if you asked me that, like, hey, what are the chances the US buys Bitcoin in the next 5 years? I would have said zero. That's a super stupid proposition. But now I'm like, dude, like it might happen in the next few years here. Like it'll take time for the policy to be passed to like facilitate it, but it feels insane to me that that is even on the table right now.
yeah, it's if you've been here since earlier cycles, you can I think relate to that. If you're new, this just feels like you're like, okay, this is sick. Like this is just
Yeah.
like nothing but like craziness every day.
Mhm.
Um, eh, I would say buckle up because there are downs to the ups and downs.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we're almost a little overdue for a nice little slap. Like I think people
Don't say
get
that.
so euphoric. Yeah.
Don't say that.
Not
uh,
like a deep slap, but one just to remind people like, hey, it's crypto. Be reasonable. Don't like put your life savings in this. Because things are crazy good right now. Um, so yeah, I think structurally things have never looked as good as they do. And yeah, I'm just super excited for especially the policy front here. That I
yeah,
think is just like going to be a key unlock for this industry to take like all of it, and especially the like teams, companies, networks that lean into that, like take advantage of the new like opportunities unlocked by productive policy. That I think most people don't like understand what the like scale that these various things can hit. That if they do lean into bringing the traditional financial system on chain.
that is a great point. I think a good kind of way to pull in the last couple topics and try to understand, I think, some of the synergy between everything is, you have Ripple addressing RWAs, you have the US government thinking about changing, possibly changing some of their asset reserves. You have more and more of these L2s, more and more chains popping up. Fragmentations at an all-time high, have more different types of asset classes being considered to come on chain. Um, it comes back to a very simple thought that is, this is going to be such a shit show. There has to be something that pulls this together in some way, which comes
Mhm.
back to your company, Omni. Um, can you talk to us like where you guys are specifically like right today? on your like
Mhm.
pathway to, I mean, we talked about having Solana and Bitcoin be able to operate between anything. Like, where are
Yeah.
you guys like right today? How should users be that like people that are even listening right now? How should they
Mhm.
be looking to engage with you? How should be builders be looking to integrate with you? Because I think it's we're very in very early days of all this, and I think having it
Mhm.
front of mind and understanding how they can benefit is pretty important.
Yeah, yeah, happy to go into that. So, where is that today? So, the core network runs across 4 different platforms. That's Ethereum L1, Base, Arbitrum, and Optimism. Sorry, I was like, what? I was like, am I really gonna forget the fourth right now? So it works across these 4 different networks. And what we're doing right now, that's like the core ability to communicate messages across these different platforms. What we're nearing kind of the final stages of right now is the first version of this like auction, this marketplace idea that I talked about in the like Robinhood Citadel type example. So what's that going to look like? So the team that we're working with most closely on this is Symbiotic. It's effectively like a restaking insurance protocol, whatever you want to like, however you want to refer to that. But it's a DeFi protocol that has like over $2.5 billion of TVL. Uh, the problem is it's only on Ethereum L1. And so they want to make it easy for their users to access their protocol. And so today, if you have funds on Arbitrum and you go to their website, it basically says like, I don't know, dude, either come back in 7 days or go like pay a fee at a bridge, but like you can't use this application. Go figure it out. With Omni, it'll just be like, cool, click button and you can use it. And what's going on behind the scenes there is effectively the user is going to lock up their 10 ETH on Arbitrum and say like, hey, somebody go put this 10 ETH into the protocol on Ethereum L1. And then some Citadel type like Wintermute, et cetera, these like other like sophisticated market participants are going to figure out the cross-chain complexity of like going and putting 10 ETH into that protocol on behalf of the user. And then they get paid back in the end. So that's kind of what version 1 is going to be here. So it's going to be this front-end SDK so that when people go to dApps, they don't get told, "Hey, you're on the wrong network, dude. Go bridge or something. I don't know. Go figure it out." It's just going to work. They're just going to be able to like click the button and they're going to be able to use the app. This really though is kind of like bootstrapping the foundation of this larger auction like marketplace type mechanism that we're building, where we'll be taking it over time those direct integrations into wallets. Downstream of that, we'll be able to integrate directly into centralized exchanges. There are so many people that have crypto today and like use crypto, but have only bought it on a centralized exchange. They've never been on chain really. And there's so much cool stuff that people can do on chain, but it's really complex. And so this type of mechanism will make it so that like in whatever centralized exchange you're in, people can just be like, okay, well, I hold a Bitcoin, like, can I just press a button and get 5% yield on it? And they'll be able to do that. And behind the scenes, what's going to happen is like the user is going to be like saying like, I want 5% yield on this Bitcoin in some like lending protocol that's out there. And then it's like these third parties are going to go make that happen on behalf of the user. So that's really how we solve uh, the cross-chain complexity problem. It's not by removing the complexity, it's just by putting it on really sophisticated third parties and forcing them to compete in an open auction to serve users so that users always get the best outcome. So that's where we're at today. In Q1, Q2 here, you're going to see the first versions of this live out in production. The core mainnet is running right now. And then Q3, Q4, basically right now we're already building the Solana integration on this. And later this year, you'll hear more about it expanding to other platforms. But that's kind of like the two different ends here. We're expanding the networks that it's on, and we're expanding this like auction mechanism so that people just don't have to think about the complexity. It just gets outsourced to these third parties who specialize in making sure that they are giving users the best rates. So that's kind of directionally where we're going in 2025. And like the sprinkle on top of that is we're working with teams like Ripple to like really drive forward RWA innovation across space. Like, can we get more RWAs across all these different DeFi protocols? And the thesis there really is it's just going to really drive activity so that anybody that is involved in that is going to benefit from it. So that's kind of like where we're at today and where we're going to be going throughout the rest of the year.
It's incredible. I think XR or Ripple as a partner, or at least having them as a resource in your back pocket is extremely valuable.
Mhm.
Again, back to the original reason of asking the question. Uh, you guys have a long vision of like where the ecosystem's going. It sounds like you're making pretty quick strides
Mhm.
to attack that. You mentioned something in there though, and I hate to like derail off of this specific topic, but
Hit me.
it's one that, you
Mhm.
know, I've talked to a lot of AI founders
Mhm.
recent weeks. Wayfinder is working on ways to basically make pathing, where you can ask an agent to do something like, "Hey, can you stake my 1 Bitcoin?" Or, you know, and then take the stake Bitcoin and swap for this DeFi coin. Or like people can make these paths and it just happens for you.
Mhm.
There's other founders that have talked about the ability for all these agents to do these things for you. And then you describe a very similar idea that is, well, if you have a Bitcoin, you can just click and do it. How do you view that approach versus what you're doing? How do you view your integration into this whole new AI front? And I guess also within that question, like how do you view this current AI meta that we're in?
Yeah. Yeah. So the really cool thing about this is AIs use crypto systems. And so Omni doesn't care if it's Wintermute that fulfills the user request or some AI that is like really good at pathfinding. It's totally unopinionated. It's just this open auction marketplace. And, we'll probably see a world where Wintermute is competing with an AI agent and they're like bidding against one another to fulfill a user request. And so it has no opinion on like who or like what, I guess, is fulfilling these requests. It specializes in just creating this marketplace so that the user doesn't have to think about all this complexity. And so I totally see a future where agents are bidding to execute requests on behalf of users. And this is nice because of the fact that it's an open auction. Like, you're not gonna, we're not gonna move to a world where instead of Citadel screwing over users, it's agents that are screwing over users because the agents are gonna have to compete with one another and like bid for those requests. And so that I think is something that is going to happen and something that actually think we're like very well positioned to just kind of provide order flow to these different agents. How I think about this kind of network and the like revenue model at large is order flow is the only thing that matters. A lot of teams, I think, are still thinking in this like L1 is like the foundation type thing. I actually think that that is wrong. I think the only
Really?
system, yeah. So this is like a pretty controversial take and like explains a lot of like why we're doing things the way that we do at Omni. But it all comes down to the fact that I think it was 2017 that Union Square Ventures posted this blog that was like, okay, cool. It's going to be inverted in crypto world. In the internet world, we have thin protocols like the TCP/IP protocol
Hmm.
that didn't really capture any value, and then we have like Google and Facebook that captured all the value. It's going to be different in crypto world though, where you're going to have fat protocols that capture all the value, and then we're going to have skinny apps on top that really don't capture this. So downstream of this, like the very left curve investment rationale is like, well, I want to buy L1 coins. Like that, that sounds good to
Right,
me. Like,
exactly.
yeah. And so I think this is totally wrong. And I actually like there's data out there that I think like really justifies this rationale. And so it actually goes back to what we're seeing with Ethereum today.
Yeah,
So
that was gonna be my point.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the value has escaped the priority fee ordering, the primary source of revenue for these networks, priority fees, has moved from Ethereum L1 to L2s at this point in time. But all the L2s are competing with one another. And so there's not really margins to take at that priority fee level anymore. And we're even seeing this go a step further where applications are doing application specific sequencing where they're really the ones that capture the priority fees here. So I actually think that this post was entirely wrong, probably led to the misallocation of over $1 billion of capital over the past few years. And it's not going to be L1s that capture a majority of the value. I think the only thing that matters is order flow. How close are you to the origination of order flow? Because that's where fees will be able to be taken. And like apps that are directly sourcing the order flow are going to have sustainable business models. And this is good. We don't want a world where Ethereum captures all the value and then having a business model for creating a crypto app is basically impossible. Like the industry will stagnate. We want applications to have sustainable business models. And this will all come from their ability to source order flow. Omni is going to be right behind that, sourcing, like helping them get those actions done across chain. So this is the way that I'm viewing the world. And a lot of people, I think, like don't understand that that type of perspective. And therefore, they don't understand our product strategy as much. But when you understand, like, I only care about order flow, what we're doing makes a lot more sense.
That's fascinating because I've never like I mentally look at L1s being like okay, so like Ethereum. My inner DC investor is like chomping at me right now. Ethereum is your settlement layer. It's your security layer of like where everything's going to settle back to. So wouldn't you want that to be what's accruing the value? And if the value leaves that, doesn't that introduce risk or
Mhm.
risk to that infrastructure? I think that's kind of where most people at a higher level kind of like think about. And then um, yeah, I think that's where most people like get held up. They're like, well, okay, well then the value is not being correctly like distributed within the stack.
Mhm.
Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, do
I
you agree with that or?
I mean, my response to that would be like, what is the correct distribution of value throughout the stack? Like, what is Ethereum really doing for a majority of users today when a vast majority of activity is happening on L2s, which are run by single computers by companies out there? Like, sure. In this going back to like, I've worked across a number of these communities. Is there like a deeply libertarian part of me that like hears this and is like, no, no, like it's escaping this like nice, beautiful, decentralized world. Like, yeah, like objectively that's happening. It's crazy to me that a lot of Ethereum people complain about Solana being centralized today because there's two layers here. One, a vast majority of activity is being sequenced by sequencers on L2s today, so just a single computer. On top of that, if we're actually working with Ethereum L1, there's two companies that create 90% of the blocks. And this comes from the centralization of the builder pipeline. So, like, yes, would I love this incredible world where everybody's on this shared network and it's like totally decentralized? Anybody can run a node. Yeah, yeah, I really would love that. And it's something that I care about a lot. But do I think that the market structure and the like constraints of this technology are showing us that like if we operate with that type of like ideological mindset, it might lead us to these like dystopian worlds where it's like, well, actually, it's just a few companies processing all the transactions at this point. Yeah, I think it does, and I think what we're seeing in the Ethereum ecosystem proves that. And so, I think it's important to be realistic about like what's happening in the current ecosystem and
Mhm.
design around those technical constraints and how the value is being distributed, so we can get as close to an open and permissionless like on-chain economy as possible.
So the two ways of looking at this then are and Union Square Ventures put out and said, look, this is going to get scattered and everywhere, and it's going to funnel back down to these very few. Um, the opposite way of looking at this is it's going to get very scattered, and there will be some trickle, but the fees, the juiciest part of this, will be at the origination area because this
Mhm.
has to trickle down. And so if you think about, hey, there's a transaction being made and has to go through, 10 different layers, 10 different protocols, whatever, however it might be. Once it gets down to a settlement area, it's just been stripped of all of the fluff on top of it. There might be some still fees there. But the other way of looking at this is as this expands, as this spreads, there's just more and more transactions happening. And so while there might be less actual, per transaction stream down, that number actually might stay a little bit more linear as we see more incumbents, more activity interchain. Is that a
Yeah,
fair way of looking at it?
yeah, I think probably a digestible thing that people who are exposed to L1 coins today would be fine hearing is think about Netflix. Netflix owns the customer relationship, and so they have a massive audience and they make a ton of money from this. Do they pay cloud providers a lot of money? Yeah, yeah, they totally do. And there's a reason that cloud providers are as valuable as they are today. But do they make a majority of the money from Netflix's relationship with its customers? Absolutely not. And so these are still going to be very large scale platforms, but I just do not think that they will accrue a majority of the value that is created in the on chain economy. And I actually think this is good because I think the pie at large is going to be much larger downstream of this.
I I I think this is the second time on this conversation you've convinced me to like actually highly rethink a core thesis of mine, which is like a little scary. How quickly, not how quickly, but like there are some like you have some contrarian takes, and there's definitely some things that I don't know if it's the timeline or what that I feel like I've maxied myself into, which are worth
Yeah, I
exploring
feel that,
deeper.
dude. Yeah, I've
Um,
been there.
but
Yeah.
like I hate it. I never want to be a maxi. I want to be open to like taking these like contrarian thoughts because I also think that, if you're thinking the same way everybody else is thinking, you're gonna miss out on like the real gems that are out there.
Yeah, and I mean, something that happened to me recently as well is, uh, so I've been a Milady for like quite a while now, and like I love the Milady community. They're insane, but like I love them because they're insane. However, we're kind of at a point in the market cycle now where you have to be a normal person. Like, at least if you're like in my shoes and you're building a network that you like want to make an impact on this stuff, you have to seem like a reasonable person. And so I started putting out posts. I don't know. I started posting like intentionally like 5 months ago. But like a week ago, somebody responded, like, I'd take you a lot more seriously if your picture wasn't a fucking anime girl. And I was like, you know what? That's fair, dude. Like it's like actually my job to like communicate well to people who don't understand this technology super well currently. And so I'm now just a face doxed normie on Twitter, but I actually think it's important. Just like we now have this rare opportunity where there's like an audience that's like 100 times larger than the like crypto Twitter that we've been living in for the past few years, and they want to learn. They genuinely are curious. They see what's happening with Trump. They're open minded again. This is not a privilege we've had for the past few years, but like they're here now and they're like they do want to learn about these things. And so I think for all of us who have been like deep in crypto Twitter, it's worth like really thinking about that. And it's just like cool. Like I like sure whatever we got going on right now, cool, good. But there are so many more people that are interested in learning. It's like let's help educate them. Let's help them like understand what's going on here. Help them understand like where it might go and like keep a level head throughout all this because somebody is going to educate them and other people like might educate them in a way that is like not constructive for their like long-term involvement in the space.
W No comment on specific, but we have seen that. We have seen the kind of like, "Hey, we're gonna onboard the next, 10,000 people," but they're onboarding them to Pump.Fun and,
Yeah.
basically promoting,
Hmm.
gambling.
Hmm.
Um, but I think there is, like I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, being able to click in a centralized exchange and have a Bitcoin and get 5% yield on that immediately. There is for I mean, even for somebody like our parents, like, that even seems like you might have gotten them to buy the Bitcoin, but then they're like, "Well, I can just click a button and get 5% on this?" Like,
Hmm.
what the fuck? Like, there's an actual, kind of like stewardship that has to be done, and obviously you're doing this yourself personally. And I assume Omni and Ripple are and I know Ripple has significantly, but I mean, how do you see the future of like onboarding? Because we've kind of gone away from I guess like the rudimentary of like, hey, it's just Twitter and there's maybe a CNBC kind of like now we have people asking Trump about this and wait in the Oval Office briefings. Uh,
Hmm.
How do you view that? Like what's the difference now in this moment for like being a steward in the space?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that people at large need to lean into is just like one, understanding this. It's like we really do have like an audience that is like 100 times larger than has been willing to listen to us for the past few years. Like for Omni's mainnet launch, I went and spoke at the New York Stock Exchange. If you asked me a year ago if that would have been possible, I would have laughed. I'm like, absolutely not. There's no way. But like, there is this just like mass of people who are curious, and they frankly like we've been in the trenches and you learn a lot in the trenches. But like where I think this is going is just like make it easy for them to use this stuff. And I'm not even gonna shame like shitcoin trading. Like I like playing around with dumb coins. Like it's fun. Like I've gone to casinos. Like there is value in just like going to a casino and just like having fun. Having said that though, like are we going to grow the on-chain economy if the average like customer there's like a SaaS term for this, like expected lifetime value of a customer. If we can make if we can make it so that when people put money in the on-chain economy, it grows on average over a long-term time horizon and not for 5 minutes, we will grow the on-chain economy. And so just thinking with like a long-term orientation around like, what does it look like to sustainably onboard users as opposed to like, can we funnel them into pumpfun and like can we create exit liquidity out of this? That is how we like quickly like, flop this opportunity where people are curious and want to learn. If we just funnel them into things where they lose money and that gets like pulled out to like people who are insiders, cool. It's going to take a lot longer to grow this industry. So specifically thinking like, how do we get people on chain sustainably making money? That is one thing that I think structurally is going to be a very important variable in like the long-term growth of the on-chain economy at large over the coming years here.
All of your takes are very considerate, and I think I think you think about like the future very responsibly. I think there's a lot of people that I mean, you've had obviously some controversial takes on against the norms, but a lot of this has also been under the guise of like, hey, like this is realistically how things need to be handled in like a professional way, or like, hey, this is also like if things are to adjust in this range under this guise, understanding RWAs and how other participants in the space are going to play out. Um, we also need to think about it in that way and not the current structure way. And I
Mhm.
think I keep thinking back to the whole idea of like where are fees the juiciest. Back in 2021, there was no like did I might have used Arbitrum a few times.
Mhm.
Or back in 22, like um but like it was really like you really still were only using L1s. And I think to see only like the first L2 pop up and then you kind of use it and you're like, oh yeah, like of course all the fees are gonna flow back. That's not the case though. You can see this extrapolate. Um, I think also I think about like, okay, if you're gonna be at the closest like spot of where the transactions are happening, does this become a like where like a volume economy? I don't know if that's the right word. Like, because I kind of joke about like if crypto is a attention economy.
Mhm.
Um, do you consider like Omni building out a volume kind of like of its own volume economy? And those are like the protocols and types of products that are going to have like that opportunity
Yep.
to make those fees.
Yeah, volume, order flow is another way to say volume. And like I
Sure.
said, I only care about order flow. And so it's not specifically like trading volume or like lending volume. What I care about is just like money flowing through the system. And I think we're actually very well aligned with the growth of the industry at large because the more money that is flowing through Omni means that we have all the dollars that flow through there have been sourced for a simpler way for the user. So instead of having to like buy gas tokens and crawl around and like do all this stuff in the weeds, any money that flows through Omni came from a simpler way to interact with the on-chain economy than they would have otherwise. So I actually think it's good for the network, and I also think it's good for the space at large because it means that we're pushing users up in the like level of abstraction at which they can engage with the on-chain economy.
How do you? I mean, you mentioned lending. And I'm a personal investor in Gandhi, which is NFT lending.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think we've really gotten into that side of things. You guys have mainly talked about liquid tokens or fungible tokens. Um, do you guys touch in anything on the non-fungible side? Because I know that's an area, I mean, mainly, and I think lending because, um, that is definitely a pain point for a lot of these areas that like, hey, if I want to take out a loan for Sol against my CryptoPunk, shouldn't
Mhm.
that be possible?
Yeah.
Are you guys addressing that in any way?
Yep. Yeah. So similar to how Omni doesn't care if it's an AI fulfilling the request or some hedge fund, it doesn't care about like whether it's an ERC20 token being deposited into a lending vault or putting up a punk as collateral for a loan. What Omni is, from a very left curve explanation, it's a global bulletin board where a user can just say, I want to do this. And it's just like, if that thing is complex to do, like somebody can go take care of all the logistics and the user can just get the outcome. So yeah, it has no specific preference on ERC20s compared to NFTs. It's really just like any action in the on-chain economy.
Okay, so then that opens up a whole new vertical of like areas that you guys can explore. But a bulletin
Mhm.
board is, I think, a good analogy. I think that helped me on a couple areas that I was like questioning a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, it's incredibly powerful stuff. Um,
Mhm.
look, I think we've covered an incredible amount of ground here in the hour that I've had you to chat on everything from XRP to RWAs and what you're doing at Omni. Um, you guys have a lot coming down the pipeline this year. Is there anything else that people should have on their radar? Is there any other way besides following you guys, picking up some Omni on the liquid market? Like, what is there anything else people should be doing right now that you think we didn't flag
Mhm.
right now?
Yeah, I think what we're leaning into at Omni, and you can kind of see this if you follow my personal account versus the main account. But we kind of have a thesis that nobody cares about company accounts at this point. It's just like, cool, put the product releases and the like official partnerships and stuff on main. But like past that, like people want people, like they want to hear from people. And so we'll actually be rolling out a lot more of the kind of like official announcements and stuff that we're doing with Omni from my account and from my co-founder's account. So if people want to get more involved with Omni, honestly, following me or my co-founder is probably the best way to do that at this point. We also have a number of team members that just like yap on crypto Twitter, and they're like pretty active and stuff. It's weird. We like didn't intend for this to happen, but I think our team is just like we really index for hunger and ambition when we're scaling out the team. And so I think naturally, some of the team members we brought on see kind of building up a personal presence as a good way to like scale up in their career. So we have some other team members that are out there. And then the only other like call to action, like I got a text this morning from like somebody from my high school swim team, like, "Hey man, saw you on CNBC. Like, let's catch up and chat crypto." And so I think it's just like everybody who is like, especially those of us who've been in the trenches for the past couple of years and like been on crypto Twitter, help onboard your normies. Ideally, not as exit liquidity. Help onboard them in like a sustainable, durable fashion where like they can feel good about their involvement in the space. And once things go up and back down again 3 years later, when like new opportunities come up, they're not going to think like, yeah, like sure, what you want me to just go lose $500 again for no reason. Ideally, they're like still holding on to their Bitcoin or like whatever they got involved in at this
Yeah.
time. So I think that's the thing that like those of us who have stuck around through the past few years here, I think it's the most important thing we can do. Just like onboard them in a sustainable fashion.
Could not echo those points any louder. I think they're two amazing points. If you're not already, make sure you're following Austin at 0xASK. He's very active, has some great takes on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Um, really grateful to everybody who showed up today for this chat, and Austin, especially for your time. This was so valuable, even just for me, selfishly. But yeah, I'm looking forward to following what Omni's doing closer, and possibly buying some Ripple after this as well. Two pickups I might have to make
Yeah.
here.
Well,
But yeah, thank you, man.
well, I want to extend the thanks your way as well, dude. Yeah, like seeing you on X, you do a great job. I think you like do a really good job helping people communicate about what they're building. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in this space, and I think you help like pull it out of people in like a way that is comprehensive to them. So yeah,
I,
great work on building out your like platform and getting people out there to like kind of like we've touched on, just like helping educate people in like a reasonable way.
dude, thank you so much. That means a ton. Means
Mhm.
means so much.
For sure,
Um,
man.
well, dope. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. And make sure you go follow Austin and check out everything that he is up to. But yeah, thank you guys.
Cool. Cheers.